Hello, welcome back, I hope you're doing well. Coming off a very strong September, now it's time for DyerBoi Diaries Spooky Edition. This is all the stuff I watched in October. There's a few more horror movies in here than normal. I am partial to the odd horror movie, but I watched maybe a few more than I might have if it had not been October. Without any further ado, let's just jump into the first movie I watched in October, which was Spider-Man No Way Home. I've talked about this extensively before, you probably already know how I feel. I've changed my rating though, and I'll explain why. I've realized more recently that when I've rated Marvel movies, I've been rating them just as Marvel movies and not as movies in general. And don't get me wrong, they are Marvel movies and you need to acknowledge that in a rating, but I don't feel the balance between those things was there. Is No Way Home good? Yes. Is it as good as most of the other movies I had given 4 stars? No. But yeah, it's still fun and the new stuff was cool. I kind of wish they put most of it in the real movie. Moving right along, I spun my movie wheel again and I got my man Cullen, who recommended Mars Attacks. And Cullen, fuck you! There was hardly anything to care about or enjoy in this movie. Nothing means anything, there are no stakes, there's nothing interesting going on visually. It's just a series of awkward, cringy bits that do not work on their own. What was the point of the fake out with the dove? Why do all these big name actors get a setup and a motivation just to die with no consequence? Why does Jack Nicholson play 2 characters, especially when the other one has a story that can be completely removed and wouldn't change the movie in the slightest? Like, that's fine if the film is meant to be a farce and nothing matters and everything is about the bit, but there are multiple things in the movie that contradict that. The emphasis overall is on the development of the conflict between the humans and the aliens rather than on the jokes. Yes, it's all sort of tongue-in-cheek, but there isn't enough commitment within that. If you want to do this properly, you need to emphasize the comedy set pieces before everything else and actually make the bits and the characters funny. This fucking American football player finds his way back to his family and it plays like a triumphant moment in the story. Same for Jack Black's brother, who gets his medal at the end and seems to get set up with Natalie Portman. Am I meant to care? How can I be expected to invest when everything else in the movie is telling me not to? There's no vision behind the whole thing. It doesn't feel thought through. It feels totally rushed and random and like they just thought, oh, this would be funny for this scene. It's dumb, thoughtless filmmaking and I hate it. I really wouldn't mind if it was actually entertaining, but it seems I'm also at a total disconnect with Tim Burton's sense of humor in the movie as well. Like, oh haha, this guy is a creep and he's an idiot for not realizing she's an alien. That's not funny. Haha, he's a disembodied head and she's on a dog and they're kissing. Haha, that's not funny. I just find it all kind of weird and cringy in that awkward, over-the-top way that some musicals can be weird and cringy, which is annoying because I really enjoy Beetlejuice, which is one of Tim Burton's more similar movies to this one. I just don't like the way he makes movies in general, if I'm being honest, and I think he's one of movie history's most overrated directors. Then I watched Halloween Ends, which was even worse. I didn't hate it as passionately as Mars Attacks, but I did hate it, and I actually have too much to say about this one for a diary video, so I'm writing a separate script just for this movie right now. Then I watched Smile, and it was good. It's very much in the vein of It Follows, The Invisible Man, and those types of movies, but not only does it have its own style of execution, but it's actually a very interesting response to many recent criticisms of the horror genre as a whole. For example, everyone hates how cheap jump scares are for scaring the audience, so instead, Smile has a jump scare every 5 to 20 minutes to keep the audience tense and in constant anticipation. In my opinion, the movie has changed the function of the jump scare on a minor level, and I think that's clever as fuck. Another silly moment you often get in horror movies is when a character thinks they've seen something, so they go and check it out, but there's nothing there. Even jump scares I have a bit of a guilty pleasure for, but this habit is always so annoying and anticlimactic. In Smile, at moments where the main character thinks she sees something, when she goes to investigate, it's still there. This is far scarier to me. This thing, whatever it is, doesn't need to hide. It sits right there in plain sight because it is the one in control. The sound design is fantastic in my opinion and made a lot of moments really intense and scary. The last 20 minutes are so entertaining with the twists and turns, and the ending itself with what happens in the story and the final shot, I absolutely loved. I was waiting with bated breath, really hoping they would go with the ending I had in mind, and I couldn't believe it when they actually did. It's a movie doing a very simple and very familiar thing, but in a very effective and at times subversive way. Only complaint I have is A-Train's performance. Good acting is just generally a given with big budget films, and I personally often don't notice bad performances, but this guy's acting stuck out like a sore thumb. Fix up, buddy. Then I watched Knives Out for like the 4th time, and fuck it, 4.5 stars. This is such a well-rounded, outstandingly hilarious movie on every single fucking level. The jokes, iconic. The costumes, even more iconic. The set, beautiful. The shots, luxurious. The mystery, the pacing, the twists, the thrills, it's all just so good. This will go down as one of the best ensemble casts of all time, and I really don't think any of the sequels will come close to how good the side characters were in this. I'm also just obsessed with all the little touches, like how enough people say that they were outvoted in including Marta at the wedding that you know at least one of them must be lying. A microscopic thing that reinforces the entire appeal of the movie if you pay attention. The structure is just so crazy and engaging that every time that coin gets flipped or Marta goes through to the interrogation room, I feel my whole arse start to shake. Then I watched Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery in an early screening, and I loved it. Firstly, what I said earlier was right, this cast is not as engaging as the first, it doesn't find those combinations with interesting chemistries in the way the first one does, and it's a whole lot less quotable. The pacing is not as airtight, things take a while to get going, and there's definitely a lot of setting up. And my biggest issue with the film is that I think it kind of cheats sometimes with what it tells you. It will straight up show you a shot, then later show you the exact same shot just with stuff that wasn't there before. And there's also a major twist that for a first watch has little to no foreshadowing, which are both faults the original film never had. Apart from that though, this was one of the best movie-going experiences I had all year. I'll say it. In terms of a payoff, this is bigger and better than the original. It's more explosive, more complex, more tightly wound, choosing to tell a story that panned several years and concerned multiple different central events apart from just one. The wrap-up also spans a longer segment of the movie than in the first, which I'm sure will result in a greater sense of anticipation during future watches. The mechanics of the story are so cleverly subversive and fresh, taking a greater focus on the intricacies of the spoken words of the characters that you would never think twice about as you watch, but were always there. It's also definitely a response to the premise of the first one, as the emphasis is placed far less on solving a murder than it is on untangling a more general web of villainous behaviour. More so than the first, and similarly to Johnson's first film Brick that I watched last month, the thing that makes the ending so interesting and satisfying is how it is reflective of the qualities of its characters. The highlight of the year and so thoroughly entertaining. Also, Knives Out deserves an award of its own for the amount of pure baddies in one franchise. Ana de Armas, Kate Hudson, Madeline Klein, and Michael fucking Shannon. I mean, wow. Then I watched The Craft from 1996, and low-key, it's a bit of a banger. It's got that sarky 90s teen edge of something like 10 Things I Hate About You, and that smokiness and gothic thrill that movies beyond this time just haven't had. I love the focus on spells and powers, and that the movie isn't afraid to have some cheesy fun with that. Girls changing their hair colour? Fuck yeah. Another cool thing to note is the interesting parallels to real-life witchcraft, which I do appreciate. Make the script more quotable and structure the last act a little bit better, and you've got a substantially better flick in my opinion. Next up, I watched one of my most anticipated movies of the year, the Palme d'Or winner Triangle of Sadness by Ruben Astlund. I booked tickets 2 months in advance because there was only one screening scheduled for my town at the time, and I did not like the movie at all. If you've seen my review on Letterboxd, you'd know the second act of this movie literally nearly made me throw up, but trust me, that isn't the reason I don't think this movie is very good. Yes, that was a horrific experience that I never want to go through again, and no, I still can't really relate to how everyone else was laughing at something so nightmarish, but I applaud anything this emotionally evocative. If anything, that sequence is one of the greatest things about the film, and I give it points really just for this scene and for how well shot it is overall, which it is. The movie just didn't come together for me. Like, yeah, I get the satire, it's kind of hard not to with a movie this in your face, but there's just no depth to it. Perfect example, why were the captain and that Russian talking about political ideologies for so long? I get the irony, it's an American socialist and a Russian capitalist, but what is the actual fucking commentary here? And as for the rest of the movie, what, lower class people are more practical and resourceful than upper class people? I mean, okay. The last act as well was momentarily fun at best and arduous at worst. It's just a really empty movie in my opinion that is reaching so high. There are all these plates spinning in the first act, but by the end most of them have been dropped and a few of the people spinning the plates threw up along the way, and now you just have to go home feeling a bit sad. Then I watched May, and it was good. This central performance by Angela Bettis was an absolute knockout. You know when you watch a movie and in the first 5 minutes you feel like you already know everything about the main character? this is one of those. It's tapping into something properly uncomfortable, not in a way I've seen any other horror movie do before. It didn't make me feel disturbed as much as it made me feel embarrassed and a little grossed out. I gave it a 3.5 when I originally watched it, but this has since gone down to 3 stars. I think it's solidly enjoyable for its uniqueness and the cast, but I think the first 2 acts and the third are a real disconnect with each other in that setups that line up throughout the film just don't meet super satisfying conclusions, and what happens narratively in the third act just seems to come out of nowhere. I liked it, but I don't think I'll be watching it again. Then I watched The Banshees of Inisherin, and I thought it was really good. It's really funny. The performances are also dedicated and memorable. It's got some lovely environmental shots, a good score, a really good script. I left the film very satisfied with what I'd experienced. I think it's all perhaps in service of exploring a couple of central ideas rather than various ones, which I do see as a drawback to the film. Bear in mind, I have only seen it the once, and I'm very open to the fact that there is more to discover in it. I also think the journey of the film is found in how the story unfolds rather than how the themes unfold, and that a stronger focus on bringing out different themes in the story would have made the film stronger. On that though, by the end, it does feel very complete to me, especially for the decisions made in the final scene. Colin Farrell and Kerry Condon's performances were outstanding to me, and I would be very happy if either of them won their respective Oscar category. I'm in two minds about Barry Keoghan's inclusion, not for any faults with his performance, but for how his character seems almost superfluous to the rest of the film apart from a couple of points. I think In Bruges is more fun, but I like it about the same, and my favourite one of Martin McDonagh's still is and will probably always be 3 Billboards. It's got its flaws, but I think it's another strong outing from Martin McDonagh. Next I watched Doctor Who: The Power of the Doctor, which was technically a TV special, but who cares? For context, Doctor Who is my other favourite TV show, sort of. I got into it during the Matt Smith era, and it was my favourite thing when I was about 8 to 10. Some years later, I watched the whole thing from the beginning and got red-pilled on how elite the Davies era is, and to be honest, I can't say I care all that much for the Moffat era anymore. Really, my second favourite show is those first 4 seasons and nothing else. The only other Chibnall episode I have watched is Revolution of the Daleks, and while I've not sat down and watched The Timeless Children, what's sure to be Chibnall's most memorable story, I will say that I think the reveal in that episode was character ruining, shock porn intensive, spit in the face, fan wanky, fucking retcon bullshit that I do truly despise. Regarding The Power of the Doctor, I'll tell you what, from what I've seen and heard, I think a good number of people would agree it's probably Chibnall's best. Unlike Revolution of the Daleks, which was just a miserable time all around, I found this to be good fun. The dialogue is awful, it's a mess up and down with misplaced and in other places much needed development. There are also plenty of plot holes and dumb things, but I will give leeway considering the nature of the show. I think the decision to not fully commit to the Dr. Yaz romance with at least a kiss was a total cop-out and a bona fide example of mainstream queerbaiting. The Doctor getting Unit in to threaten the Master with guns and even making her own companion use one was just awesome. The Daleks and Cybermen were all but useless in the greater plot, and I think some of the bigger plot holes for the stuff that was integral to the story were unforgivable. If the Master wants the Doctor to be framed for all these crimes he's gonna commit after taking over her mind, why would he force her to regenerate into looking like him? Why could he not just as easily go around in his current body pretending to be the Doctor? It's the same body. But as I was saying, there was good fun. Bringing back old Doctors is always cool, even if most of us don't have a single shit to give about the companions of 5 and 7. I think the lone Cyberman was awesome, and I really bought him as this unstoppable juggernaut. I enjoyed the pacing and how there was always something going on, so the bad stuff never had too much time to linger. The rah-rah Rasputin moment worked really well and was a funny moment in the way it intended itself to be. I didn't really want the concept of the old Doctors returning to be explained so quickly given how much build there's been to its introduction, but I think the explanation itself wasn't a bad way of doing it at all. And the icing on the cake was, obviously, seeing off this rather rubbish era with my Doctor and my favourite actor coming back onto the screen and an ending fitting of the show's 60th anniversary. I can't wait for the specials, I can't wait for Shooty, I can't wait for Neil Patrick Harris as the celestial fucking toy maker, I can't wait for Donna, for Rose, for Wilf, but most of all, I can't wait for the new vision of Doctor Who under the control of Russell T Davies. Then I watched I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I was really shocked by how little I liked it. It starts off at the seaside on the last day of school, there's Sarah Michelle Gellar and some popping 90s music music, I was ready to love it, but straight up, this movie is just boring. Like, no two ways about it. Some of the acting is bad, the mystery isn't even that interesting, the villain sucks, and there are only like a couple of good kills. Even that 90s vibe was not enough to save this movie. I can't remember the last time I watched a mystery film and the killer was literally just some guy. Scary Movie had me thinking this was in the same ballpark as Scream, but that could not be further from the truth. If I had to describe the movie briefly, I would say
beautiful tits and wreck. Love it. See ya.
Then I watched X by Ty West, and for like the 20th time this month, I was just so disappointed. I thought this was going to be a highlight of the year for me, I got so excited for it, and it was just boring to me. Old people are scary, I guess? I don't know. There was one scene where I felt an interesting idea start to develop, then it goes nowhere, and the movie ends. Some of the kills were cool, and the effects were super impressive. This motif with the editing was interesting, but I have no idea what the purpose was behind it. I don't know, man. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't particularly scary, and I honestly expected it to be artistically challenging in some way, but as far as I can tell, down to its bare bones, it really is just another slasher movie. Then I watched Twilight in a theatre, and oh boy. I took George from last month to see this without telling him what we were watching because I remembered him really liking it when he watched it before, and he loved it. No, come on, I want to hear your thoughts. How'd you like the movie?
We missed a train for this.
I used to think Twilight was bad, but over time I came to my senses. I never read books, but I have read the first half of the novel, and the movie is better. They're just two totally different things. The book is a pretty good take on young adult fiction using vampires to tell a story that's really about metaphors for sexual psychology and forbidden love. The movie is mainly about vampires and stuff, but it doubles as maybe the most subtle and most self-aware parody I've ever seen that has left me with more to talk about than most movies do. Don't get me wrong, the studio thought this was serious and had no idea what movie they were making, but Catherine Hardwicke, Arpat, and K-Stew knew exactly what this was and hated what the studio wanted it to be. It is so heightened, so idiosyncratic, and so goddamn influential to the way that teen fantasy movies have looked and sounded since. It's a comedy riot on the one hand, and on the other it has an absolute magic trick up its sleeve in how through all the stupid facial expressions and lines, it actually makes you invest in the story and characters. I think it's pretty faithful to the novel in terms of the romantic subtext when it isn't the focus of the film, and stylistically I think the focus on shots of Edward and Bella just enjoying each other's company strengthens their relationship for the audience a whole lot. Also, this is one of the best first kisses in any movie, let's not fuck around here people. I miss when mainstream popcorn movies could be this strange and this expressive, and while I love the franchise as a whole, this is the best of the bunch. By the way, if you were Team Jacob when you watch these, don't talk to me ever, thank you. And I finished off the month with Barbarian, which was good, but my feelings are very, very mixed. I watched this with about 5 other people, and we all felt that the film was pretty good when it could have been great, and that the first half was stronger than the second. The way that the story pans out as a whole is pretty mesmerizing, with lots of unique decisions that I loved. This runs into problems when looking back at the film after it finishes, because certain parts of it feel kind of unnecessary from this perspective. There's a story told in the first 30 minutes or so that doesn't play into the rest of the film at all, and I feel like it could have been trimmed. An issue with the horror ties into the story too, as for me, the more we saw and the more we learnt about what was going on, the film became less and less scary. The horror element of the film itself was really good. There are some real moments of horror greatness in here that are far more creative than most of what's coming out right now. Its use of composition to communicate the environment was especially impressive and how it affected me as an audience member. I think the creature design is a bit silly though, and something that really gets in the way of how fresh the theatrics in the film are is how tired and stupid some of the cliches were at some points. What's weird too is that in particular moments the film actually seems to address and criticize some of these tropes, but in others it's totally reliant on some of the worst of them in pivotal story moments. Irrespective of my problems with the film, I still applaud its ambition, especially with how funny the movie gets and the ending that emotionally took me somewhere I did not expect. I guess the best way of describing the whole film is that for every brilliant thing it does, it seems to have another holding it back, apart from a handful of moments that really shine unabashedly. And that does it for everything I watched in October. Again, thank you all very much for watching. Stay tuned for more video diaries and essays coming in the future. Stay safe, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.